Welcome, everyone, to the Fantasy Knuckleballers podcast. Here with us today is myself, Aaron, and my esteemed colleague, Rich. And we're in the middle of our main keeper league. It's an NL-only draft, and there's a minimum number of keepers year to year. It's a snake draft, 5x5, your standard rotisserie categories. And wanted to at least bring you in kind of a live update as far as what's going on. It's now currently Rich's pick.
Well, right now, Aaron, we're in the 13th round or the 18th round in a NL-only league draft.
Yeah, that's a big key here. It being the 13th round and being an NL-only draft, there are a lot of the players out here is kind of reaching the bottom of the barrel from a fantasy perspective. And right now, Rich needs a catcher. He needs 2 pitchers for his starting rotation. He does have Segura on his bench right now. He has some minor leaguers on his staff as well, most of which are probably not expected to break camp. Spencer Howard may be the exception there, but pretty much he's not going to be able to rely on many of his minor leaguers to break camp. So with that set up, I'll let Rich talk about who he's considering, which way he's going, and why.
Well, starting right here, I need a catcher, but really where I'm focusing is on pitching. And I've been trying to decide between an elite backup reliever versus a starting pitcher. My starting pitching so far, I've got Zach Gallen, Jake Flaherty, Sonny Gray, Noah Syndergaard, who I'm going to have to sit for 2 months until he gets ready, and then Tony Gonsolin. So I'm definitely behind on starting pitching, so I'm kind of leaning that way. I have one closer in Will Smith. So the guys that I'm looking at Yimi Garcia for the Marlins. I'm looking at Mark Melanson for the Padres. I'm thinking he could snake some saves. I'm looking at Freddie Peralta because I believe he's the guy that's going to get me over 100 Ks with a good whip and a potential to have a breakout season with the ERA. And Trevor May, just a solid backup reliever who, if something happens to Edwin Diaz, then he's my guy. But then from a starting pitching standpoint, it's really getting tight. You're going down to the 4th and 5th starting pitcher, and I'm really wanting to save my 2 other bench spots for pitching since I've already got Gene Segura on 1. So I'm really, even though there are some offensive players that I like out there, I still like Avisail Garcia out there. I like Devon. He just got picked. I'm sorry. He just got picked by the Fighting Homers. But
yeah, I was pretty disappointed about that one.
Yeah, I like Evan Longoria. I really like Odubel Herrera to win the job in the Phillies camp. I know he's not on the 40-man yet, but I believe he will be.
Yeah, based on what he's been doing this spring training here, I think he could be a really legitimate sleeper here in 2021. Yeah, like I said, he's on no one's radar right now, and he had decent numbers his first few years, and he's back. There's no more restrictions on him. I think he could be a really fine sleeper.
I think for somebody really late in the draft, I think he's the guy that you can get a lot of upside. Now, for starting pitching, the guys that I'm looking at right now, I'm looking for TJ Anton to break out for the Reds. I'm looking at David Peterson in the 5th spot for the Mets. He had a decent season last year. It's something he can build on as a former first-round pick. And then Chase Anderson for the Fields. Both Peterson and Anderson are playing on good teams. They're both going to get a chance to take the ball. They're probably going to be each team's 5th starting pitcher. The guy I'm going to go with is going to be Chase Anderson. And my reason is, other than 1 year, he's always had an ERA around 4 or slightly below, a whip below 130. He's not a K guy, but he's going to get you 140, 150 innings with the potential to have around a 4 ERA and a below 1.3 whip. And I need innings right now at this point in the draft. So that's my reason for taking Chase Anderson. Aaron, who would you have taken in that same spot?
Well, go over your main people. Your David Peterson. It was David Peterson, Chase Anderson. Who else?
TJ Anton, and then really that was my 3 starters right now. I do like JT Brubaker for the Pirates, but I'm thinking of him later on in the draft. But those are the 3 guys that I'm looking at right now.
So Chase Anderson's not bad. I might have probably went David Peterson. Especially with you, it probably wouldn't have hurt you quite as much because you had Noah Syndergaard. So it's kind of like you having their backup. And David Peterson had a pretty good year last year. That's probably the way I would have leaned. I do agree with you. TJ Anton is probably a good dark horse here. Even if he doesn't come away with a starting role, I think he could be a valuable bullpen piece, and he could be a dark horse to be the closer. Like I said, the closer is still wide open. So, but like I said, Chase Anderson, if you wanted more of a proven veteran and a solid pitcher, then yeah, you can. Chase Anderson's fine.
And that's what I was looking for. I'm looking to have 4 to 5 dependable starting pitchers and then fill it out with high upside relievers. So I'm with you. I struggled between Peterson and Anderson, and I went with Anderson just for the track record.
Yami Garcia was drafted right after Rich there, which is convenient because I'm up next, and we can go ahead and look at what I'm looking for. So this is my team currently. So some of these a little bit. I actually have all my roster positions filled. I'll move Dylan Carlson and Brian Hayes to my starting lineups once the draft is finished and probably right before the start of the season. I have Christian Patch there as well. Depending on his role, I might activate him or wait a little bit. But I basically have my starting lineup set. So anybody I pick here on out is pretty much bench spots right now, which bench spots are pretty valuable. And a good thing one thing I look for when I'm trying to fill out my roster is flexibility. Being able to having 4 outfielders plus 3 outfielders on your bench is not going to do you a lot of good. So having players that have multi-position eligibility, taking bench spots from different spots in the field is pretty important to me. So like I said, I could really use another outfielder. I could use another pitcher. I do have some flexibility on my roster already with Tommy Edman, Garrett Hampson. So I do got a little bit of flexibility built in already. It seems like my roster is very middle infielder heavy, especially with those guys middle infielders that can play outfield and in middle infield there. I don't know, Rich. What do you think? Thoughts? Like, would you go pitching if you were in my shoes, or hitting?
I was thinking maybe you possibly need another outfielder. I know that you're big on having your sleeper closer picks, the backup guys that end up getting the job. Looking at your starting pitching, you've got. I mean, I would say you have 5 or 6 starting pitchers, and then Dustin May on your roster. If you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think at this point your roster's pretty solid. The only weakness I potentially see is if something happens to Aguilar, who do you have at first base? And then with your outfield, you have Mookie Betts, Dylan Carson,
Conforto,
and Conforto. Okay. I guess my worry might be Garrett Hampson. Does he win the job and play every day in center field? Because I know he is battling Hillard in center field, and then at second base, I'm wondering if they don't go with Brendan Rodgers or somebody else. I mean,
yeah. So I think my main decision on outfielder, like you mentioned Garcia earlier. I like Garcia, but I think Garcia is definitely going to have the reserve outfielder role with Milwaukee. To be honest with you, at this point, anybody out here is probably going to be a reserve outfielder in the 13th, I guess now the 14th round of an NL only draft. So you're pretty much looking at light hitting infield guys or reserve spots.
The other thing I was thinking is right now would be a perfect time to add that backup closer that you like. I don't know who you got or who you like. I don't know if it's Melanson or if you're thinking there might be you might end up with Lucas Sims late and hold him, or are you looking at somebody like Freddie Peralta? Have you considered him at all?
Lucas Sims was recently drafted.
Oh, okay. Okay, I missed that.
Yeah, it was kind of under the radar type of thing. So yeah, this is another topic I want to mention after this, but yeah. So I was in on Neris. Neris dropped for whatever reason. I think what happened was Archie Bradley was drafted earlier in the draft, around round 6 or so, and everybody slept on Neris. I was all in on him at around pick 100, and he was taken right before me, as well as the closer I was, Galagos.
Yeah, I kept wondering why you didn't pick him earlier.
I
had Hicks.
At other players I wanted to take.
I understand.
But I have Jordan Hicks, and having Gallegos like on my roster I would have definitely sealed up the closer spot for St. Louis, and hopefully I don't live to regret that all that much. We'll cross our fingers there. I guess my problem here at this point of the draft is I've got one pick now, and my next pick isn't until about 20 picks after this. So I've got to go to whole 20 picks. And when you have a jump as big as this, the level of talent between now and then is going to go down dramatically, unfortunately. So I'm probably going to get one of my guys, and that's about it. Other players that are out here that I'm at least leaning towards is Caleb Smith. I believe he's still out here, isn't he, Rich?
I thought he went earlier, but let's look.
Yep, he's gone. Never mind.
One thing I was thinking is, there are some good players here. You got Kevin Newsom on a rebound, but you already have shortstop, second base.
I could play another shortstop and put Edman out. He'll have outfield eligibility, so I have flexibility there.
You also got your guy Shogo Akami.
Akiyami.
Yeah, Akiyami. I mean, I'm surprised one of you sissy guys hasn't jumped on him yet.
Yeah, there's a lot of Cincinnati guys in this draft, and the Reds players have been going really high, which is the reason why I do not have any on my team as of right now. I don't. I'm not a homer. I don't believe in that. If I'm going to take a guy, it's because it's going to be a good value. I don't care if he's on my favorite team or not, but that's just that's the smart way to play fantasy sports. And if when you're in a draft, knowing if there's homers out there, it really is important. Like I said, I know Rich is a huge Braves fan, so my first pick was Albies. Keep that in my back pocket for later in the year for trades.
I'll definitely be interested when you're ready to deal.
So anyhow, I think my major decisions here, Johnny Cueto's still out there. I think opportunity there. I like Michael Lorenzen for the Reds as well. I do like Sean Doolittle. I think he's going to be my sleeper for closer. I like Lucason's gone, Amir Garrett's gone, and unless Rich, steals Doolittle from me because of this podcast, I think Doolittle might actually make it 20, even though there's a lot of Reds players. I do like Trevor May as a pitcher as well. But like I said, at this part of the draft, you're looking at backups. There's a lot of players what you're going to get, like Evan Longoria, Yadier Molina, Mark Melanson. Well, to a lesser degree with him because his role is undefined. There's a lot of players out there that you don't expect a lot from, and for good reasons. But then there's usually players out there that have big question marks over their head. They're usually younger guys that you really do not know what to expect. They might have had a bad year last year. They might be in a new team. They might have a new position. They might have finally had that chance to prove themselves. And at this point of the draft, that's usually where I focus my attention, unless there's a position need that I need. So that's probably where I'm going to go here. What were you going to say, Rich?
Oh, there's still a lot of upside. If you look at last year's draft, I think I got Brandon Belt late in the draft, and he was a big player. You got Dom Smith off the waiver wire, the first waiver wire pick. And then I think Corbin Burns went really late, right in maybe the last round last year. So there's value. You just have to find it.
Yeah, absolutely. I know a lot of people at this point in the draft would say, well, they're all garbage at this point, and it doesn't really matter. It's all a lottery ticket. And to a point, it is a lottery ticket. Evan Longoria, he's not a lottery ticket. He's what you're going to get. He's kind of at the back end of his career. He's not going to suddenly break out and hit for 40 home runs again or anything like that. So I think I'm going to lean toward Luis Urias. There's a lot of talk about him in Milwaukee this year. They did not bring in a shortstop to replace him or Arcia. They've got a little bit of positioning with Kelton Wong coming in at second base, moving Hura to first. They did bring back Travis Shaw, but I think Luis Urias is probably going to have the first chance at shortstop, and I think he'll see a lot of time at third base as well. And Urias has enough potential for me to go ahead and pull the trigger at this point. I would rather have somebody with outfield position eligibility, but I'm looking at talent at this point.
So you're going upside over dependable 21 guy.
If you noticed that all of my drafts, early in the draft, I'll take, your constant performers, but I'm always looking upside regardless of where it is in the draft. Like, I'm not looking for those guys on the back half of their career that's past their peak. I'm looking at guys on the upswing that have more to prove and have the ability to break out. Sometimes I get burned by that, but like I said, last year it didn't. I did well for myself last year. A lot of things panned out for me, and good year. So from here, like I said, just kind of recap on what I'm doing, and then maybe we'll. Rich, you could talk about your team. You do have another pick coming up in here in 2. Now I have a bench spot player. There's 4 bench spots here. I'd like to get another starter. I'm gonna have to. I might try to do the T.J. Anton, Michael Lorenzen, Johnny Cueto. One thing, I was reading a lot of what the manager for San Francisco was saying, Gabe Kapler. San Francisco has been doing a lot of work with their pitchers and hitters. They've been doing a lot of training with them, improving the players that they have in terms of pitching and hitting. They're turning a lot of their pitchers have been undervalued, and that's because they're getting a lot out of those players. And I do like what they're doing in San Francisco as far as their training and development of their players. And if you're looking for those sleepers, those late round picks, taking some of the pitching players off the pitching staff for San Francisco is a good idea. Cincinnati, also, from what reporters have been saying, they're doing a lot more with spin rates with their pitchers, and that's why they had a lot of improvements in 2020 with Michael Lorenzen and T.J. Anton. They're teaching their pitchers to more effectively spin their balls, and they're having a lot more success with that. So that, like I said, they got a lot of guys that they're trying out for the starting role and the closer role. So if you have to throw a dart late in the draft, you might as well throw a couple darts in one of those 2 teams' directions. You could probably, in most times, get some of those players kind of cheap, and it might be worth a dart throw. But like I said, for the rest of the draft, I will probably try to split my bench 2 and 2, 2 more hitter, or sorry, 1 more hitter and 2 pitchers. If I can find a starter, that's great. Otherwise, I'll probably be looking for those relief pitchers that could take the role, like a Trevor May. I do like that Crichton for Arizona. I'm not 100% sold that Soria will be the closer all year. I do like Wick in Chicago, too. I have zero faith in Kimbrell. Somebody's going to have to get the saves there. So I think Wick's the next best player. How about you, Rich? What are you doing for the rest of your draft?
Well, I'm looking at pitching right now. I actually like some of the hitters better, but, you've got me thinking like Anthony Discofani out of San Francisco making a rebound. If you look at his 2019 season, it was pretty solid. He could be a guy that comes in and rebounds his career, looking at starting pitching. So, and then I've kind of been struggling. Do I take a Trevor May, who is really good backup, but he's following Diaz, and I'm not sure Diaz is going to lose that job? Or do I go with somebody like a Mark Melancon, who might be in a share opportunity in San Diego with Drew Pomerantz? Or even, like you said, Stephon Crichton. I think Soria could be out by midseason, either through a trade or possibly Crichton just pitching better. But you could see a move. Arizona's not a team that's going to be at the top of division. You could see them trade a couple of pieces later in the year and open up some spots. So I'm really trying to make that call right now when my pick comes back up. And then also I've got catcher that I need to get, and I'm really wanting to get Yadi Molina, but I'm kind of leaning on going pitching right here in my next pick.
Yeah, I think you could probably use another closer. I would look hard at Trevor May. I really would. There's probably a few other closers out there, or I guess pitchers with the ability to get some saves, like Melanson. And he, like I said, this is a perfect example of CBS with their out of whack stats. They forecasting Daniel Hudson with 20 saves. If Brad Hand does what Brad Hand should be doing, there's no chance there.
And I actually like Tanner Rainey to be the backup.
Yeah.
Over Hudson. I think Hudson's third in line. If Rainey's healthy, he becomes the backup.
There's some other closers out there. I think Trevor May would probably be at the top of my list here as closer potentials. Melanson might be the second. After that, I could see you taking Chris Martin too, just to, double check that you have the closer for Atlanta. But, you could also roll a dice with some of the San Diego pitchers. Pagan and Keela, like both, we mentioned in the last podcast that both of those guys could have saves opportunities. Speaking of which, you're now back up on the clock. Let's see who has been taken.
Well, let's see.
Akiyama, who we were both talking about, is now gone.
This is a struggle because I'm really trying to decide between Mark Melanson and Trevor May. And I actually think Trevor May is I think they're both really good pitchers, but I think Trevor May gives me more strikeout potential and more upside. But I just believe that the Padres, even though they might lean 60-40 one way, I don't see Drew Pomeranz getting all the saves. I kind of see it being at least a 70-30, 60-40 split. What do you think, Aaron?
I'm not huge on Melanson in general, even if I was much heavier on Pomeranz before they signed Melanson. And that's not because they signed Melanson. It's not because I think Melanson is going to steal saves. It's because that maybe San Diego doesn't have that warm and fuzzy with Pomeranz.
They have such a deep bullpen, they could just go based on matchups.
Yeah, and like I said, they could, and they made some that knows that the traditional closer role and use closer by committee. Oh, by the way, there was a error when we were talking about Cole Hamels. It's actually Josh Fuentes and not Cole Hamels.
Okay.
But it doesn't sound like it's going to affect you there. I do like – I'll take a second to talk about Fuentes. He was one of those guys, like my first base situation isn't – I'd like a little bit more secureness in first base rather than Aguilar. I do think Aguilar might be underrated this year. If you look at his track record from 2018 to 2020, 2018 he was phenomenal. 2019, he took a huge step back. And then 2020, he actually produced well in that short time span. Last year, everybody was looking at 2018 as being the outlier. So, hey, 2018 was a fluke. Obviously, 2019 proves that he can't do that. He's not that type of player. But then 2020 came around, and he actually produced well. And granted, it was a short season. Whether he could have kept it up the entire season, we don't know. But that was enough for me to say, hey, I think there might be something here. I think he might be more of a 2018 player than he was a 2019 player. So that's my roll of the dice there. Granted, by the time I took him, there wasn't a lot of first base options. Hamstrung myself by going with best available.
I like Aguilar late. I think you did great with that pick. My only worry would be just having a backup because you never know what can happen. I mean, he did have that bad 2019 season. And then really there's a little bit of uncertainty. They've got a lot of first base type players. They got Garrett Cooper there as well in Miami who can play first base. I think Aguilar is going to be the guy, though, and I think he got a solid pick. I kind of beat myself up because with the 32nd pick overall, or or my 4th-round pick. I took Eric Hosmer. I really feel like I really hurt my team by not taking a starting pitcher at that point. I could have had my guy Soroka. I could have
he fell.
Closer. I could have had a closer. There were a couple of players that honestly I should have gone a different route. And then I could have gone CJ Cron and maybe Aguilar later and got 2 guys. I like Cron. I took him late, mainly because he's going to Colorado. He had a bad 2020 season. He was hurt, but his 2018 and 2019 was very solid. He's going to a great place to hit, and I expect him to hit 30 home runs and have a decent average now that he's in Colorado and playing every day. I don't see Josh Fuentes taking his spot, though. Colorado's does some strange things. I think it's going to be CJ Cron. I think I got a steal late with him in the draft.
I don't feel strongly about CJ Cron there, but as far as power potential, Cron has it and Fuentes does not. So depending on what kind of player they're looking for, I think the first 2 to 4 weeks it's going to be a platoon. CJ Cron hits like he did last year. It's going to be Fuentes. Fuentes, I feel more certain that you know what you're going to get. You're probably going to get a little bit higher average, a lot less power, and they will probably take that versus the 2020 CJ Cron. Now, if CJ Cron of old comes, then Fuentes won't see the field much at all. So it's a good gamble for where you got him. I'll agree with that. And you did take Trevor May. And like I said, I think that was your best shot choice there. We talked about this when we were talking about NL closers, that you and Justin were really high on Diaz. I, on the other hand, was not. And I think Trevor May will be in line for saves. Diaz might get a little bit longer leash than some closers, but I don't think the leash is going to be very long at all, especially after he struggled the last 2 years. Like I said, you may have gotten a really good pitcher there with a lot of save potential. And at this point, like I mentioned, you're looking for potential. Who has the potential to outperform their ADP? And I believe Trevor May, there's high risk, but there's also high upside. And those types of players are here.
So who is your favorite pick so far out of your team? Well, I mean, you can't count your first round. I would go your entire first round, but we can't go there. You started out with such a great team and then 3 first-round picks.
Yeah, having 3 first-round picks really helped. But granted, it cost me a lot of player capital in order to get these 3 first-round picks. So excluding the first round there, I think a lot of high upside players, and I was talking to Rich before this about it. A lot of my players, you can probably predict who I'm going to take because I'm always drafting those younger guys under the age of 30. They always have a high upside. I don't know. I guess the one pick, I won't say this is my favorite pick, but as far as like the pick that I had that I am most curious about is Joe Musgrove. I had already taken 2 position players. I could have gone anyway. I could have gone another position player here, another bat, or I could have went another pitcher. But with the keepers that we were using, and how the players in the pool shook out, there was a lot more high-end pitchers available than there were hitters, which is one reason why I was pretty happy to take 2 position players in the first round.
One guy I was surprised that he dropped so far was Anthony Rizzo. I really thought about taking him at 12, and he ended up going 21 in round 3. So I was surprised he fell so far. But I agree, to me, the weakest position in the NL this year is outfield to me. But
yeah, outfield is always kind of deep. I was ready to take Rizzo. I'm not a huge Rizzo fan, but I was prepared to take Rizzo at 24. I thought the value there at 24, and granted, it's 24 with the NL only and with keepers. So in a normally it'd be a lot lower.
It'd be 74th pick overall.
Yeah. So, like I said, I thought it was a pipe dream to get if Rizzo would have fallen to me at 24, but like I said, I was pretty happy if he would have fell to me there.
I like Musgrove. I really think, I think you did good getting Musgrove. I think,
Yeah, like I said, he's kind of like the enigma for me. He's had some really good. He has a lot of potential. Put it together throughout the entire season. I think he's excellent opportunity in San Diego. At the very least, he's going to get a lot of wins. So, like I said, he's probably my most intriguing pick. What about you, Rich? What pick do you like the best?
well, my favorite pick is sniping you for Ryan McMahon. So, plus he helps my team. He qualifies, I think, first, second, and third. So he gives me a lot of depth. I'm going to plug him in at second base and plan on giving me 20, 25 bombs. But I love taking him mainly because I knew that you were probably leaning towards him and you needed a first baseman. And there were only two left at that point. But my favorite pick, or my best value pick, I really like Gene Segura. I don't need him, but I got him in the 10th round or the 15th round. I think he's a guy that's going to give me, 15 home runs and 10 to 12 stolen bases with a 280 plus batting average on a team that's going to get me some, he's going to score some runs. So I really think he gives me a lot of value, and maybe it allows me to move somebody else and add some pitching that way.
Yeah, that's an interesting point that you made up right there. Or at least it's interesting that you pointed out Gene Segura because I had two picks right before that. As you can see, I was kind of sandwiched in between like two of Rich's picks. They were between 9 and 10. So obviously I was looking at Ryan McMahon there, and you did, thump me there. Normally, if I really want a player, and like I said, I needed a first baseman, I would normally pivot and take the best persons elsewhere. But because first base was so thin, first base is not one of those positions that last long in drafts because normally they're typically power positions. People are going to go out. It's not like there are going to be a lot of first basemen here in the 13th, 14th round. So I knew that if I didn't get a first baseman there, I would be really struggling all year at first base. So I went ahead, took Aguilar. That's when I did the research, 2018, 19, and 20 numbers, and that's when I came to that conclusion before. And to tell you the truth, he might at the end of the year be one of my favorite picks. Like I said, he has the potential to be really good. So I'm hopeful. And then, like, coming back with 20 in round 10 there, pick one, I really thought long and hard about Segura there. Like I said, it is a good pick to get Segura there. He has a guaranteed role. He has a second base job all to himself. He'll give you a little bit of home runs and give you a little bit of stolen bases, and his average is not too bad. Like I said, I really thought about Jake McGee there, getting another closer. That's the problem with taking – non-elite closers or closers that might have a battle. You may have to take an extra closer or two just to make sure that you have the minimum number of closers you can have to compete. So I really thought about McGee there, and if I had to, if there was a player that made me regret that pick, it was Jake McGee. Like I said, I really wanted another legitimate closer, and I think Jake McGee might have been the last one in my eyes. But anyhow, Drew Smyly, I went with Drew Smyly because in my eyes, he was the last good starter left on the board. He opened a lot of eyes last year in San Francisco, and I already mentioned what San Francisco is doing with their staff and their hitters. There's a lot of good things going on out there. Granted, he signed a pretty decent contract for 1 year in Atlanta. He was one of the first pitchers signed. And actually, Atlanta had a lot of options, and you could probably talk to this, Rich. they had a lot of options to sign players, different pitchers, and they went ahead and signed Smyly early because they liked what they saw in 2020. And after doing the research, like I said, there is a lot of reason to be helpful for Smyly going into 2021 here.
The Braves make good decisions. When they made this decision, I kind of rubbed my head because I didn't really understand where they were coming from. But I usually hold my judgment when it comes to the Braves because they usually their decisions pan out. For me, I mean, Drew Smyly, he improved his fastball last year, a couple of miles per hour. He held it. I think he had 11 Ks in his last start in San Francisco. My biggest concern when I look at Drew Smyly is he just hasn't done it in a long time, other than those 5 or 6 starts in San Francisco. If you look at his 2019, he spent some time with the Reds, and he was the worst pitcher in baseball.
Yeah.
He wasn't bad. He was terrible. And so he scares me a lot, to be honest with you. I do see the upside if he can hold the velocity. And obviously, there's some smart people with the Braves. They must have believed that he's going to hang on to that velocity as well. So time will tell. We'll see once the season starts.
Yeah, and that's the beautiful thing about a 1-year contract. It's basically a make it or prove it contract. And the players have all the motivation in the world. And I know in fantasy football and stuff, like you always talk about, well, he's in a contract year and he has a vested interest into doing well. And Drew Smyly definitely fits that category. He's due a lot of money in the offseason if he can put together another really good season. Like I said, it's a prove it year again for him. And like I said, if he can put it together, then he's going to get paid. So that's another reason, to have faith in him.
One guy I really wanted that I didn't get, it bothers me, is Giovanni Gallegos for the St. Louis Cardinals.
Yeah,
I wanted to snipe him just because if he does get the closer role, I have that over you the whole year. But I also really like him as a pitcher, and I regret not picking him in round 10 instead of picking up Peralta. But I only had one outfielder at the time. David Peralta's gone back 4th for the Arizona Diamondbacks. He hits for good average. He doesn't have a lot of power or a lot of speed, but he always is good with the counting stats. I kind of wish I'd gone with Gallegos there, taking my outfield later. I got a good player. I like the player I picked, but that was one pick that I was like, oh, I was hoping he was going to drop to me.
Yeah, he wasn't going to drop to you in round 11. He was taken in round 11, pick 5. Like I said, I was sitting there after the Smyly pick. Like I said, there was Smyly. I was really considering taking another closer. I was really wanting McGee, but I figured if I didn't get McGee, then Hector Neris or Gallegos would still be there, and I'd probably be able to get him pick 6 in round 11. And as you can see here, Neris went 3rd pick in round 11, and then Gallegos went 1 pick in front of me in round 11, which brings me to in my opinion, the most interesting part of the draft for me. It was well after midnight, granted, when I made this pick, and I went with James McCann, which is interesting because if you saw my team, I already had Will Smith on my roster. He was a keeper for me. I really am not a big fan of carrying 2 catchers. In my eyes, it's kind of like starting 2 tight ends in fantasy football. It's something you generally don't want to make a habit of it. I saw a lot of the people in the league were kind of sandbagging the catcher spot, and there were still a lot of decent catchers out there on the board. Like I said, I was going through and okay, who is the best chance to get stats that I need, have a good average, get me 20 home runs, and get me some RBIs and get some good counting stats for me. And I was going through, like I said, I really looked at Alex Dickerson. I like him. He's an injury risk, but I do like him. I was thinking Sam Hilliard as well. Garrett Cooper was a possibility for me. But at the end of the day, I was going through the list here, and I'm like, James McCann is the starting catcher for the Mets. The Mets are going to be a good team. They have a good offense. There's not a he's going to be the main man, unlike his situation with the White Sox the last 2 years. He's going to he's going to play in 120 games this year, barring injury. He's going to get plenty of at bats. He has a good average. He'll get me at least 20 home runs, knock on wood. And he's the best player available. Like I said, it's kind of like at some point in football, you'll say, okay, this tight end is the best receiver that I can get. This tight end will be better than any receiver or running back you could draft. So you might as well go ahead and take another tight end. And that was my philosophy here. What are your thoughts about that, Rich? I'm interested in hearing.
Generally, I'm with you. I don't believe in taking two catchers. Though I will tell you, one year, and this is a couple years back, I took Wilson Contreras early, I think like in the 5th round. And then late, I ended up coming back and taking Yadi Molina. Both of them had career years that year, and I ended up starting both of them. Molina had like 18 homers and 80 RBIs. And then when Contreras was hurt, and they helped me win my league doing that. I like McCann. I don't know if you wouldn't have been better picking another player, but maybe you can use him as trade bait to pick up another pitcher or more depth at some point.
Yeah, that's
especially if it comes out hot.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Like I said, I know there was at least 5 teams that didn't have a catcher when I took McCann, and so there's at least 5 teams out there with a worse catcher, are going to be a worse catcher than McCann. So I should have at least 5 teams out there that I can trade with. So that's another good point. But like I said, you see Gregory Blanco after that, Alex Dickerson. You can make the argument with Alex Dickerson. Like I said, if he's healthy, I think he might outperform McCann. But, health has always been an issue for him for whatever reason. Sam Hilliard is position battle with Garrett Hampson, some of the other outfielders in Colorado. So there's no certainty there. Garrett Cooper is obviously a position battle with Aguilar and potentially some of the other outfielders in Miami. So McCann was, like I said, the sure thing. So like I said, that was one of those positions that I didn't think about doing until I did it, and I'm pretty happy that I did. And actually, to answer your question from before, I'm most happy about McCann. It doesn't seem right, but yeah, like I said, I for the position and everything else, I'm pretty happy with the selection.
Catchers get hurt a lot. In round 12, who's your favorite pick? We got Sam Hilliard, Jason Hayward, Alec Mills, Garrett Cooper, Austin Nola, Starlin Castro, Carson Kelly, Merrill Kelly, Mariko Dubin, and Colin Moran. Who do you think is the best pick out of that round?
Mauricio Dubon with San Francisco. I was just reading more about him here recently over the last couple of weeks. I already mentioned what I thought about San Francisco, how they're improving their players hitting and pitching. And Dubon, I think he has a starting center fielder job in the bag. And it's just a matter of what he can do with it. There's a good chance he could provide you some cheap stolen bases. I do like Colin Moran as well. It was actually a big shock when Justin took Moran. If you remember from a podcast earlier, he talked about how wasn't a big fan of Moran. Rogers was one of those picks that he was on my radar to take and was taken by Justin, which, like I said, to me, it was out of the norm for him. I would say Dubon was probably my favorite pick there.
And I came close to taking Dubon over Hayward, and I guess I was just thinking I need some counting stats. I know Jason Hayward's going to be there all year, but I did think about Dubon because he is guy that's going to get you 10-plus steals and potentially 15 home runs. I just didn't know if that power's real or not. I liked is Starlin Castro at second base if you had a need, just because he's a guy that can hit 15 to 20 home runs. He's going to score a lot of runs, and he's kind of forgotten going this late. Mainly he's forgotten because he was hurt last year.
So with the Washington infield, I think Castro has a potential to play some third base because depending on how Kaboom handles the position this year, if he plays like he did last year, I think Starlin Castro could get some time at third base. Washington has another second baseman that I'm pretty high on. He's kind of a deep sleeper, Luis Garcia. He's a little guy. He steals a lot of bases. He could be 1A to Trey Turner as far as stolen bases if he just needs the opportunity and he needs to prove that he can hit. Those are two pretty big things, not to diminish any of that. If he had the opportunity and prove that he could hit, like he would be a really good, cheap source of stolen bases. And then when you get later in the rounds, that's kind of what you're looking for. Like, if you need a guy that it's hard to find home runs at this point in the draft, but you can a lot of times find some sneaky stolen bases, and that's kind of what you're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at Hilliard and say he has 25, 30 home run potential with 15 steals if he can just hit.
Yeah.
But he's got the best ballpark in the world to hit in. And then if you look at Colin Moran, as much as I'm not a huge fan, if you prorate his homers last year, he was on pace for, 25 plus home runs. And there's nobody, I don't believe, even though Justin seems to think there's somebody in the minor leagues ready to take his job, I think he's going to play every day for the Pirates.
Oh, absolutely. So Colin Moran I had him on my team last year. He was very useful. I don't think his numbers at the end of the year looked all that impressive, but he was a good, cheap source of power, which I just said that it's hard to find this late in the draft. He had a high pedigree in the minors, and he never did quite put it together. But he's going to be batting third. I did talk to Justin about this pick, and he took him because he's going to be batting third for the Pirates. Granted, it's the Pirates. Batting third in a lineup, it's not devoid of all talent. It's just the talent's a little less than other teams. He has a lot of RBI potentials there. He's going to probably be playing first most of the year, so you'll probably have eligibility at first and third. Yeah, and he was another one of those first basemen that I was hoping to snag later in the draft to CYA myself if Aguilar had any issues.
In the NL only, I think one of the things you got to look at is somebody's going to really help you with your counting stats. And those players are hitting third, fourth, or fifth, even if they're on bad teams. They're going to help you reach your numbers, whether it's runs or RBIs or home runs. So, yeah, that was a good pick. Late, if you have a need for a first baseman or third base, or one of the things I did was handicap myself early. I have Swanson at shortstop playing utility, and then when I took CJ Cron, that totally filled up my utility spot. So I got to have another guy that I can float there, and that leaves me out of some of these players I like. Who did you like in round 13? I'll tell you who I like. I mean, first, I think Nick Ahmed was a great late pick. If you're, just looking for a utility guy, he gives you a little bit of power, good counting stats. He's going to steal a handful of bags. But the other two guys I really like are not guys that are going to have starting jobs from day one, but I believe they will at the end of the year both have 450 at-bats. And that's Kevin Pillar for the Mets. I don't know how. I believe that he's going to get 450 at-bats. And I believe he's going to have good numbers. And the other guys, Jerks and Profar, they're not paying 3 years, $21 million for him to sit on the bench. I don't see where he plays, but I believe he's going to have 400 plus at bats and gives you second base outfield eligibility.
Yeah, you bring up a good point with Profar. I was looking at him too, and if he was still there when I took my last pick, I would have probably taken Profar. He has multi-position eligibility, which is great this time of the draft. I think he gets a lot of at-bats. I'm probably not going to be the opening day starter. They have a lot of players there that can play. They have Cronenworth, they have Kim, and they have Profar all play second base. And it's going to be really interesting on how all that shakes out. I think Kim and Profar is going to play a lot of outfield this year, but then again, they have a lot of outfielders to split time with. But I think they're going to do a lot of mixing and matching and give a lot of guys rest, which is never a bad thing. But yeah, you're right. Like Profar was a really good source of power, average, and stolen bases last year.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they do it. But they have Myers, you have Trent Grisham, and you have Tommy Pham in the outfield. So he's going to be the fourth outfielder and maybe the first guy in the infield. I don't see Cronenworth getting a lot of playing time. That's the hard part of it, and everybody loves his upside, but somebody's going to have to be on the bench.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment there. I think Cronenworth will probably be on the bench a lot more than he was last year. His numbers and his profile strikes me as having a career year last year. He could come out and prove me wrong. I wouldn't really bank on him repeating what he did last year. One, he has too much competition there, and two, he set pretty high, lofty goals last year to reach, and I think he definitely takes a step backwards this year.
What team besides your own team, and I know you haven't had a lot of time to look at it other than us looking at each other's teams, what team do you like best so far out of the draft, or who do you feel is going to be your biggest competition? And I will say this one thing I wanted to add. I will say I believe our league is probably the deepest it's been in the 20 years I've been in the league.
Oh, as far as people talent-wise?
Yes. As far as people talent-wise and drafting ability and picking players.
We do have a new member this year. He's having a really good draft. I usually judge whether or not a person has a really good draft based on how many players that I was going to take that they take before me. Like I said, I was really looking hard at Gavin Lux. I was really hoping to get him, and I actually took it was between Hampson and Lux. I decided that Hampson would be less likely to make it to my next pick than Lux. Anyhow, Lux didn't make it to my next pick. I was really hoping to get Joc Pederson there in about the 5th or 6th round. I thought he's being undervalued this year. I think because he has had a platoon role in recent years, and he's with a new team. They don't have quite the crowded outfield as the Dodgers, so I think Pederson's going to have a huge year. He's hit lefties a lot better last year than he had any time previous. There's a lot of upside there. I really like that pick. I really was going after Jesse Winker as well, which was another pick right before me. His pitching staff is probably weaker than the rest of his team. Kershaw is Kershaw. I'd like to have another pitcher to go along with Kershaw as far as like top talent. Kershaw's not bad, but like I said, if he gets injured, which he very well could, he's going to be hurting pitching wise.
I hadn't dug into the details, but Kevin's team looks strong. Just looking at the numbers, looks like he has a really good pitching staff. Kim's team looks very solid as well, but Kim always has a good team. But he has Trevor Bauer, Patrick Corbin, Zach Davies, Charlie Morton starting, Taijuan Walker, and then he has Diaz and Neris as his closer with Yimi Garcia. So that's a pretty good group.
So here's the NL only. I put the keepers down for Justin, myself, and Rich, and some of the options that we had early on. And I figured we discussed some of these options that we did like early in the draft. I figured we could talk about Justin. Justin had the first pick. And like I said, this was NL only, and there was keepers. And like I said, 3 of the team's keepers are off to the left there. His main options in the draft was Jacob DeGrom, Cody Bellinger, Christian Yelich, and Francisco Lindor. Who would you have taken, Rich?
You know, I think I would have stuck with DeGrom. I think that was the number one pick. I think if you needed a shortstop, you could have gone Lindor, or you could have gone Yelich for the outfield. But I think DeGrom was the guy. What do you think?
Yeah, and actually, I talked to Justin about this pick, and it was our episode about pocket aces that had moved him over to DeGrom. Otherwise, he was going to take either Yelich or Bellinger. DeGrom has regularly had 250 strikeouts. That doesn't fall off trees. It doesn't just happen. There's going to be a lot of fluctuation with pitching this year, and I think it places a little bit extra value on those really truly studs in the league. So I think DeGrom, Bueller's, the Snells, the players that are out there, Max Scherzer's, the players that are out there, the studs that can regularly pitch, 200 plus innings and rack up over 200 strikeouts. I think they might be a lot more valuable this year than in other years, just because like those younger guys like Jack Flaherty and stuff, they're going to probably be on pitch counts this year. Their window for opportunity is going to be a lot smaller than the Max Scherzers of the world and the Jacob DeGroms of the world.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think they're more secure. I think he's going to be a Met for the next 4 years. And part of our league, it's a keeper league. It's going to be there. Somebody like Lindor could be gone to the AL next year. Same with Bellinger, even though I think the Dodgers will keep him.
Yeah.
You just don't know. I think he's the number one pitcher in the NL. And I don't.
The number one pitcher. He's probably the best pitcher in baseball outside of Shane Bieber.
I think he's better than Shane Bieber, but we can argue that point. Maybe next
year. He definitely has the background and the history, track record.
But yeah, it was a no-brainer. I was just looking at this, Aaron. You had the sixth pick. Was Nola still on the board with the sixth pick?
Yeah.
Wow. And you didn't take Nola.
We'll go ahead and move on to this pick here. I made a lot of off-season trades and got some player picks early. I had the 6th, 9th, and 10th in a 10-team draft. Nola, Albies, Conforto, and Snell were all there. I didn't think that Aaron Nola was going to be there at number 6, but he turned out to be there. And I had a hard time. I think if I didn't have picks 9 and 10 as well, I mentioned this a little bit earlier that this draft had a lot more position play. I'm sorry, this draft had a lot more pitchers available.
Yeah, definitely.
Position players. I had 6, 10, and 9 and 10, and then I had pick 24. So I going to be a while after 10, and I wanted to come. I was keeping 2 pitchers already. I wanted to come out of the first round with at least 1 position player, preferably 2. And I was really thinking that Kershaw and a few others, Snell, would fall to me at 9 and 10. So I went ahead and took Albies, having that sure position player there. Like I said, I'll probably kick myself all year. I just didn't want to leave the first round with 3 additional pitchers. Pocket aces are great, but there's more pitchers in this draft than there are position players.
Oh, I totally agree, and I don't fault you a bit. But my question is, do you think you could have taken Nola and then still got Albies at 9?
No, I questioned the person picking after me, and they were going to take Albies. So yeah, I wouldn't have gotten Albies.
Okay. All right.
Like I said, I was wondering the same thing, but yeah. So then at 9 and 10, Albies, obviously Nola was gone.
Strasburg
was a surprise first round selection. I would thought he would have been a lot later, like 2 or 3, round 2 or 3. So I had my choice of Snell, Conforto, Gray. That's Sonny Gray, Javier Baez, Anthony Rizzo, and Josh Hader. I considered all those players. I wanted to take at least 1 pitcher there in the first round. So I went ahead and took the best pitcher out there, which was Blake Snell, former Cy Young winner. He's had some up and downs, but he's playing for a new team. They're going to have a lot of wins out there, so there's a lot of upside there. He pitched well last year as well. And then I went ahead and took Conforto, getting another outfielder to my mix. He has big time power. Had a really good average. Like an average was a good thing to see last year from Conforto. He'd been meddling around the 270s, 280s, and then last year he kind of broke out from a batting average perspective and hitting about 320. Granted, it was a shortened season, but I think it might be. Last year, it probably was sustainable.
Yeah, I really like Conforto. I definitely wanted to. I even considered trading up to try to get him or Albies. But I totally agree. Coming out of college, the talk was that he could possibly bat 300. He did it last year. We'll see if he can continue doing that. But I think he's a better hitter than a 257 guy.
Oh, absolutely.
Early in his career. And I think you got 3 keepers in the first round, and that's tough to do. So I think you got a great team to build on that are in year one to go with, Machado and Betts, and even a kind of interesting pick is Tommy Edman. He's somebody that if he lives up to his speed potential, he has the potential to be a 25 stolen base guy. The question that I hear about him is his power legit? Can he get to that 15 home run level, or is he more of a 7-8 home run guy? But he gives you a lot of flexibility. If he could hit 15 home runs with 25 plus steals, you just stole another keeper. So,
yeah, let's talk about your 12th overall pick there. I wrote down. I don't know who. I wasn't reading your mind, and I wasn't know who you were deciding between. But some of your options were Javier Baez, Josh Hader, Sonny Gray, Kyle Hendricks, and you end up taking Sonny Gray. Who else were you considering, if anybody, and why did you pick Sonny Gray?
Yeah, when I was looking at the position players, the couple of guys that I was looking at, Javi Baez was somebody I had thought about, but then I'd have 3 shortstops. Another guy, I thought about maybe taking a closer and going Josh Hader. Anthony Rizzo was a guy I thought about. He went a lot later. I thought about taking a first baseman early, but really for starting pitching, it came down to 2 guys. It was Sonny Gray or Kyle Hendricks for me. I just feel like Sonny Gray with the strikeout potential and the strikeout history was my guy. I was glad to see him fall so far in this draft. I'm surprised we had a lot of good players in this draft, maybe more than we've had in previous years.
I agree. I wasn't even thinking about having 2 shortstops already. So, yeah, I would explain Baez. Considered Sonny Gray over Blake Snell. Like I said, Blake Snell seems to be more of a pitcher that can carry the load a little bit better. Here's another interesting point that I thought about this year. I don't like taking players, specifically pitchers, off teams that are in the World Series. There's a lot extra wear and tear on their arms, and it really causes havoc. Like, for instance, Steven Strasburg last year, I predicted that he was going to have problems. He pitched so well during that World Series run in 2019 that I figured he was going to have some type of reaction or something was going to happen as a result. And he spent most of the year on the DL. And Patrick Corbin was not the same player last year that he was in 2019. And even Scherzer, for what it's worth, wasn't quite the same pitcher. Granted, you can blame a little bit of that on age too. I usually don't like taking pitchers off teams that go into the World Series. With the exception of 2020, I actually think that pitchers off of, World Series teams might have an advantage over some of the pitchers this year because of that extra work. Because a lot of teams are limiting, the number of innings. These players like Buehler's a prime example. Dustin May, Gonsolin, and even like some of like Blake Snell from the Reyes, Charlie Morton. They actually got a little bit more work in than the rest of the leagues. So, like I said, I think that actually helps them in 2021 rather than hurt them. Factor in my drafting as well.
What was interesting is we both did it fairly early. You took Dustin May, who is right now the Dodgers' number 6 starting pitcher, and I took Tony Gonsolin, the Dodgers' number 7 starting pitcher, or vice versa, depending on who you talk to. And neither one of them has a secure role. And I know I took Gonsolin in the 8th round over some other starting pitchers that have more secure roles, and you took Dustin May back in the first pick in the 6th round. So tell me, what were you thinking there?
Dustin May, everybody has their guy, right? And whether it's fantasy football, baseball, or basketball, or what have you, you have your guy. There's guys that won you a league or helped you win you a league, or you had on your team last year, pitched really well. I've seen a lot of Dustin May, and he is a legit pitcher. On any other team in the league, he'd be the ace, or he'd be the number 1, number 2, or even at the most number 3 pitcher. And on the Dodgers, he's like the number 6 pitcher. The Dodgers have a plan for this year. They went out and got Bauer, which made a lot of people shuffle, but they have a plan. I don't think Bauer's going to be pitch every 4 days like he wants. They're probably rotating a lot of their pitchers in and out. I wouldn't be surprised if they made a trade, sent David Price out, or maybe Urias. Dustin May and Gonsolin is probably going to get some starts, and they'll probably end up with about as many innings pitched as anybody else on that staff, in my opinion. I think at least starting off, Gonsolin, in my money, might be more in the bullpen than May. It's really up in the air. I would predict May to be in the starting rotation more than Gonsolin.
I think May and Gonsolin both are going to have opportunities this year. I don't think they'll end up with as many innings, but I can see them getting toward that 120 spot. Okay. I mean, for me, with Gonsolin, if you look at his player card, he's got 86 innings in the majors. His ERA is 2.61 and his WHIP is 0.93. Over 14 starts, and he's got 83 strikeouts. So a strikeout per inning. I kind of go back to what you're saying about Dustin May. He's not quite as flashy. His stuff doesn't light up like the 6'6" with the big red hair guy May does, but he's a really good pitcher, and I believe he's going to put some good. I believe both of them are going to put good numbers this year. The Dodgers are going to be tough to beat.
Oh yeah,
I'm just wondering, how many baseball games can they win? I mean, they might could beat the 116 regular season wins done by the Mariners a while back.
Here's my prediction for the year. Like, check this prediction out. You've heard it here first, okay? So every year, the Sunday night baseball game on ESPN, if they're playing, is Yankees and Red Sox. Every time they're playing on the weekend, it's Yankees and Red Sox. Every single time. They're probably on Sunday night baseball at least 4 or 5 times every single year. Probably more like 7 or 8 times.
More than that.
It's probably half dozen to a dozen times every stinking year. The rivalry is good, but like I said, it's just a little bit much on Sunday night baseball every single year. But my prediction is that Dodgers-Padres Sunday night baseball probably won't eclipse Yankees-Red Sox, but it'll be a close second. They might get 8 to 10 games on Sunday night baseball this year. What do you think?
I could see that, and I could see it be Yankees Blue Jays this year that gets on.
They might. Rays Blue Jays would be more interesting than Yankees Red Sox. Red Sox, I don't think have quite come back, but Tampa's was running the World Series. The Blue Jays are up and coming. Yeah, the Yankees are the Yankees, but it's going to be kind of interesting too. So throw that in there. If they're not on the AL East, then it's probably going to be the Dodgers and Padres.
I can see it.
So, anyhow, let's go back to these picks. Justin had a pick at number 21, Rizzo, Moustakas, Pham Yastrzemski. He went Rizzo. We already talked about that. Getting Rizzo that late at 21 in our draft was kind of impressive. At 24, I had Musgrove, Urias, Julio Urias, Kettle Marte, and Tommy Pham. I went with Musgrove. We already talked about that. I also had pick 30, Jordan Hicks, Charlie Morton, Tommy Edman, Gregorius. At that point, the closers were starting to come off. I wanted to make sure I got a dynamic closer. Jordan Hicks. Early reports out of camp is that Jordan Hicks was pretty electric so far. Like he pitched in one game and he had a bullpen session. Coaches were raving about how he looked. From what I took from it, it's all green lights. Gallegos would have been a really good ace up my sleeve if something happens with Hicks, but I don't know. Like if Hicks looking like Hicks of old, I don't think anybody gets him out of the closing role. What do you think, Rich?
I think this pick you took a risk on. I like Hicks. I mean, he hits 103 on the radar, but he's coming off missing the entire year in 2020. I think you took a little risk when they were probably safer closers, and that might be because you're really good at being the closer sleeper to know who's going to come up next. But I think there might have been some safer picks than Hicks right there, and you could have got another pitcher, whether that was Morton or somebody else. And then, one thing I was thinking about, and I think I know why you didn't do it, is why didn't you go Julio Urias over Musgrove? Is it because you just worry about the Dodgers having Dodgeritis and him sitting too much?
So, like I said, it had to do with 7 pitchers there. Urias probably, numbers-wise, probably a little bit safer, but I've never been much on safe. I like upside. I think Musgrove, there's a lot less competition there. I think San Diego could give him competition, but I think from a competition standpoint, there's a lot less there. He actually ended the season last year with Pittsburgh. He started off horribly, but in his last 3 starts, he was money. He was dealing. He put together a good last September last year, which is why there was a lot of off-season interest in him. So, like I said, he has a lot more upside there. Like I said, he ended last year on a very, very high note. I rolled the dice. Who would you have taken? Urias?
I think I would have gone Urias over Musgrove, but it would have been really close.
Yeah.
I would have. It would have been between those two guys. I think Musgrove can give you potentially more innings and possibly more Ks. I just feel like Urias is going to put it together, and he's going to be an elite starting pitcher. I might would have gone Urias just because I believe the upside's higher.
I did, and like I said, I agree with you there. I think Urias hasn't reached his full potential yet. They're very similar. They're almost equal. I just thought that Musgrove had less competition. That's why I kind of leaned that way. But as far as Jordan Hicks down there, so the closers that were being taken after Hicks was Amir Garrett, who has a lot of competition there, and there's no certainty there. There's Soria for Arizona. He has a little bit more security, but like I said, I still like Creighton as a sleeper there. And Will Smith, who you ended up taking about 18 picks later. Will Smith, I really thought about Will Smith there rather than Jordan Hicks. Like I said, I think Will Smith probably has a better security there. But like I said, Jordan Hicks is flashing a lot of good stuff here in spring training, and he tops them as far as strikeout potentials altogether. And then again, I was hoping to get Gallegos to lock down the whole St. Louis closers. But like I said, that didn't happen. But I'm still happy with the Jordan Hicks pick. Which closer would you have taken there? If you had that choice, would you have taken Will Smith that 18 picks earlier?
I think I would have leaned Amir Garrett for the upside.
Really?
I do, but One thing about Garrett is it's not a for sure deal that he's got the job, but I think I would have leaned him and then had Will Smith as the backup guy if I was going closer.
Well, so from that perspective, in my opinion, Amir Garrett's competing with Sean Doolittle and Lucas Sims. Jordan Hicks is competing with Gallegos, and I think that's probably it. So from a competition standpoint, I think Hicks has a lot less competition than Amir Garrett. And like I said, I'm still saying right now that Amir Garrett will not be the closer. He might get a save here or there, but he will not end up with the most saves for Cincinnati this year.
Wow, that's a big take. I like it. I'll hold you to that one.
Yeah, I am from Cincinnati, and I'm not going with it. I'm actually targeting Sean Doolittle here in probably my next pick or two. Like I said, I think Doolittle. Like I said, Lucas Sims was kind of held back a little bit by injuries, and I think Sean Doolittle, if he can put together a decent season, I think it's his job. So, do you want to talk about your Hosmer pick?
Yeah, well, we talked a little bit about it earlier. I think this pick was my biggest mistake in the draft.
Is I picked 32.
At 32, I took a first baseman when I could have waited and probably even gotten Hosmer later in the draft or gotten another good first baseman. I just really like Eric Hosmer, but I definitely overpaid for him. I think at this point I'd have been much better off going with like Mike Soroka, even Herman Marquez. David Price was available. There were closers on the board that I could have gotten. I really feel like that was a mistake that hurt me in the draft and limited my flexibility. I really needed another outfielder there. That would have gave me more flexibility. I think taking first base, he has no eligibility any other place. I think it hurt me, and he's limited upside guy too at that, even though it's a solid upside.
I see a trade potential working out here. I'm kind of in a need for a first baseman, and I currently have an extra catcher, so we could talk after this, and we might be able to work something out here.
I don't know if a catcher is going to get it done. We can talk about it.
That's funny. We'll go ahead and end on pick 34 here. I took Tommy Edmonds, Gregorius, Schwarber, Soroka, DeJong, and Winker was there. And if I had to do it over again, I guess the one player that I regret not getting is Winker. I'll start with him first and tell you why I ended up with Edman. Winker showed up. More or less broke through last year. His power came through. He actually had a decent batting average too. His batting average didn't kill you. Like I said, he actually broke out. He had really good numbers, and from a power potential, if my team lacks one thing, it probably could really use another home run hitter. And like I said, he would have definitely been that home run hitter. So, like I said, if I ever regret making this pick, it would have been for Winker. I end up with Edman because normally when I start targeting hitters early in the draft, it's for home runs or stolen bases. Tommy Edman will give you stolen bases and will give you a decent average. And he has eligibility pretty much across the infield. And that's important, especially with trying to put together a roster. If you have early flexibility with Edman even has outfield eligibility. If you have this early flexibility, it allows you to start going after the best player available, because you can put Edman in the outfield if the best player is a shortstop, or you can go after a third baseman or a second baseman if they're the best player available, and it keeps your options open. And you always want to take the best player available. You don't want to get in the spot where you're taking this guy because he's a first baseman or a shortstop, and you need a shortstop. It allowed me that roster flexibility, as well as giving me some stolen bases. Definitely will come in handy down the road.
Did you ever consider Didi Gregorius there? Because
Yeah,
shortstop.
yeah, he's definitely an option. I like Gregorius. He would have he definitely more power than Tommy Edman. Like I ended up going with Edman just because of the position flexibility. I felt that I might need stolen bases then, and I could come back and get some more power later. So,
well, I saw the Cardinals today play, and they're projecting him to play to bat first most of the time. Possibly, maybe against a left-hander, he'll go down in the lineup, but they're projecting him to be at the top of the lineup. So he'll be
perfect for stolen bases.
Yeah, be good for stolen bases and runs.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks everyone for listening. This has been the Fantasy Knuckleballers. Rich, along with me, Aaron, went over the only draft. You can follow us on Twitter at FKnuckleballers, email MVP@fantasyknuckleballers.com. You can go to our site, fantasyknuckleballers.com. If you send us an email, and you can feel free to ask us questions. We'll answer them on the air. We'll usually get back to you pretty quickly. We'll send you an email as well if just to make it a little quicker. But feel free to reach out and ask us anything you want. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.